You know, in all my years on this bench, over 40 years, I've seen a lot. Police officers come before me all the time. Good people, most of them. They protect our streets, uphold the law, and for that they deserve respect. But that Tuesday morning in November, something walked into my courtroom that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a drunk driver or a petty thief or even a tense family dispute. No, this was Chief Robert Mancuso. 6'2", silver hair, uniform pressed to perfection. He didn't walk into my courtroom. He strode like he owned the place, and in his mind, maybe he did. This wasn't a routine case. The FBI had been quietly building a case against him for over 2 years. Corruption, bribery, evidence tampering, the works. But no one in Providence knew yet. I arrived early, as always, been doing this long enough to know that being on time isn't enough. You have to be early. 8:20 a.m., cup of strong black coffee in hand, reviewing my docket. That's when I saw his name, Chief Robert Mancuso, contempt of court. My first thought, how could a man with that much power, that much influence stand here on my court schedule and think he could flout the law? You see, 3 months earlier, Officer Tommy Rodriguez had been accused of excessive force. The case should have been straightforward. But then reports vanished, dashcam footage disappeared, witnesses suddenly forgot what happened. Someone high up was meddling. Someone with enough authority to make evidence vanish. Someone like the police chief. Now, the courtroom was unusually packed that morning. Lawyers I didn't recognize, men in suits, even an FBI agent quietly observing from the back. And then, right at 9:30, he appeared, Chief Mancuso, walking with that smirk, like showing up was his favor to me. I looked him in the eye and asked, "Chief, why are you here?" And do you know what he said? "I run this town, not the mayor, not the council, not even you." Every hair on my neck stood up. And right then, I knew this was no ordinary court day. If you want to see how one man's arrogance led to a shocking courtroom arrest and how justice finally caught up, stick around. And before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss this. Because what happened next wasn't just a lesson in law. It was a lesson in power, corruption, and how nobody is above the law. 3 months before that tense courtroom showdown, the story began with Officer Tommy Rodriguez, a good kid, 5 years on the force, married, 2 little girls. He'd been accused of excessive force during a routine traffic stop. Simple, right? Except the evidence didn't add up. The dashcam footage went missing. The partner's report vanished. Witnesses, once clear in their statements, started changing their stories. One by one, the case was crumbling, and anyone paying attention could tell someone powerful was interfering, someone who could make evidence disappear, make witnesses falter, someone like the police chief the FBI had noticed. Quietly, carefully, they started their investigation. They needed proof, not rumors. They traced every suspicious disappearance, every sudden change in testimony. They followed leads, collected documents, and monitored conversations. And while the public had no idea, the federal investigators knew exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. Judge Caprio had his own suspicions. In his 40 years on the bench, he'd seen officers lie well. But this was different. Something about the missing evidence, the unusual chaos in the Rodriguez case, smelled like corruption at the highest level. And when the subpoena for Chief Mancuso's testimony arrived, Caprio knew the stakes had changed. That morning, the courtroom felt heavier than usual, more lawyers than normal, suited men in the back rows, whispers passing like a storm through the gallery. Agent Sarah Collins from the FBI sat quietly, observing every interaction. No one knew her full role yet, but Caprio noticed her intensity. Something told him the man entering the room would try to intimidate, to assert control, to test the limits of the law itself. Then, the moment arrived. Chief Robert Mancuso's name appeared on the docket, the man who thought he could manipulate the system, who had spent 25 years building relationships with politicians, business leaders, and fellow officers, was about to face a judge who would not be intimidated. As the minutes ticked closer to 9:30, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't just a hearing for contempt of court anymore. It was a confrontation between arrogance and integrity, between a man who thought he ran the city and a judge who knew exactly who really did. And just like that, the stage was set. The chief would walk in, full of confidence, unaware that the room was about to change everything he believed about power. At precisely 9:30, Chief Robert Mancuso entered the courtroom. Every step deliberate, every movement calculated to show dominance. 6'2" of uniformed authority, silver hair perfectly combed, shoes polished to a mirror shine, the kind of man who believed respect wasn't earned, it was demanded, and today he was here to demand it. The courtroom fell silent. Lawyers shifted in their seats. Students from Brown University scribbled notes frantically, and longtime spectators like Mrs. Patterson froze mid-breath. No one had ever seen a police officer behave like this in front of Judge Caprio. The arrogance was palpable, almost tangible, hanging in the air like smoke. I called his name. Chief Mancuso, you failed to appear for your court-ordered testimony last week. Do you have an explanation? He smirked, looked me directly in the eye and said, Judge, with all due respect, I had more important things to do. I run a police department. I've got real criminals to catch. Not sit here answering questions about paperwork. The courtroom murmured, stunned. Paperwork, I thought? This is about evidence tampering, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice. But Mancuso didn't flinch. He stepped closer to the bench, invading a space no one dared enter without permission, and continued, voice louder now, dripping with authority. Judge Caprio, I think you need to understand something. I've been protecting this city for 25 years. I have relationships you wouldn't believe. The mayor, the governor, business leaders, they depend on me to keep this city safe. Every fiber of my being tightened. I had grown up in Providence knowing bullies. This was a new breed, a bully with a badge, shielded by decades of power, arrogance, and connections. And yet, despite his intimidation, I remained calm. Chief, I said, steady and firm, the only relationship that matters in this courtroom is your relationship with the truth. Do you understand why you're here? He ignored the question, turning to the packed courtroom with a look of contempt. I run this town. Not the mayor, not the city council, not even you. I decide what happens on these streets. I decide which cases get priority. I decide what evidence is important and what isn't. And frankly, I don't think you appreciate the position you're putting me in. The silence was suffocating. Every eye locked on him, every mind racing to comprehend the audacity. Even his lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but the chief waved him off. Then he crossed a line. His threats edged into the personal, his voice lowering, chilling, like deliberate. The courtroom collectively held its breath. The stage was set for something no one could have anticipated. The arrogance, the threats, the overconfidence, all building toward a breaking point. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Chief Mancuso had already overstepped every line of decorum, his threats dangling in the air like dark clouds over everyone present. His lawyer whispered, trying to salvage the situation, but the chief waved him off. He wasn't interested in saving face. He was there to assert dominance. Judge Caprio remained calm, seated firmly behind the bench, hands folded. 40 years on the bench had taught him how to measure his words, how to keep control even when confronted by a man who believed he was untouchable. But inside, a storm of anger and disbelief roiled. This was no ordinary contempt case. It was the moment when the full arrogance of a corrupt officer collided with the unwavering authority of the law. Mancuso leaned forward, pointing at the judge with a finger like a dagger. You sit there thinking you're important, he said, voice echoing in the courtroom, but I know things about everyone in this city. Judges, politicians, business leaders. I have files on everyone. Maybe you should think carefully about how you handle this. Gasps ran through the courtroom, whispers, muffled reactions, a palpable fear. Yet amidst the tension, Agent Sarah Collins in the back row remained focused, watching every movement, every expression, every word. The FBI had been waiting for this moment. They needed the chief to reveal exactly how far he would go when cornered. And now he had taken the bait. Judge Caprio's voice remained calm but firm. Chief, your threats have no place here. You are sworn to uphold the law, not intimidate those who enforce it. But Mancuso, drunk on arrogance and years of impunity, thank you, ignored the warning. Dismiss this citation, forget about the subpoena, and we can go back to business as usual, he threatened, leaning closer. Otherwise, the courtroom held its collective breath. His voice lowered, every word deliberate, chilling. Otherwise, I might have to make some phone calls about your family, your son's law practice. Maybe worth investigating. Now the line had been crossed. Personal threats in an open courtroom, witnessed by dozens, recorded by hidden devices. The FBI had prepared for this exact moment. The tension reached its peak. The chief was no longer just arrogant, he was reckless. Everyone sensed the tipping point, the arrogance, the overconfidence, the threat of power colliding with law and order. One move, one word, and the courtroom would erupt, and that moment was fast approaching. Then it happened. The room seemed to shift, almost imperceptibly at first. Agent Sarah Collins stood, badge gleaming, followed by 3 other federal agents who had been quietly positioned around the courtroom. Chief Mancuso's confident smirk faltered. His arrogance, built over 25 years, crumbled in an instant. "Chief Robert Mancuso," Agent Collins announced, her voice cutting through the silence, "you are under arrest for criminal contempt, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, bribery, violation of civil rights under color of law, and threatening a federal judge." The courtroom erupted into whispers, gasps, and stunned silence all at once. Lawyers froze mid-note. Students stared wide-eyed, and spectators couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Mancuso's uniform, badge, and years of influence meant nothing here. The law had finally caught him. He tried to speak, to assert control, but the agents ignored him, handcuffing him methodically. Cameras had recorded every threat, every admission, every act of intimidation, every word he had spoken, every file he had brandished as leverage now stood as evidence against him. Judge Caprio stood behind the bench, calm but resolute, watching the man who claimed he ran this town be led away in chains. There was a moment, just a heartbeat, when Mancuso turned back, eyes wide with disbelief, shoulders slumped. The bravado was gone, the arrogance, the smirk, all replaced with the pale reality of accountability. The courtroom had witnessed justice unfold in real time. This wasn't a headline story or a dramatic reenactment. It was real. The chief's threats, his years of corruption, the fear he instilled in honest officers, all exposed, all undone in one decisive moment. Even the seasoned lawyers, who had seen countless high-profile arrests, couldn't hide their astonishment. Mrs. Patterson, sitting quietly for 15 years, whispered, "Finally, justice." And the young law students scribbled furiously, knowing they had witnessed a historic courtroom event. Judge Caprio allowed himself a moment to breathe, feeling a mix of relief and vindication. This arrest wasn't just about one corrupt officer. It was about sending a message to anyone who believed their badge placed them above the law. In those few minutes, the scales of power had shifted. The city's integrity, shaken by years of misconduct, found a small but vital restoration. The law had spoken loudly and clearly. No one, absolutely no one, runs this town except the law itself. And in that courtroom, every witness, every observer understood it. In the hours and days that followed, the impact of Chief Mancuso's arrest rippled across Providence. Local news outlets covered the story relentlessly. Corrupt police chief arrested in Judge Caprio's courtroom after threatening judge. Headlines screamed. But the real story wasn't the arrest itself. It was the change it inspired. Officer Tommy Rodriguez's case, which had been sabotaged by missing evidence and tampered reports, was finally resolved fairly. The truth, buried under years of corruption, emerged. Rodriguez was exonerated completely, returning to his duties with pride, knowing justice had finally been served. Families of honest officers, long intimidated and silenced, could finally breathe. Detective Frank Torres, a 20-year veteran, came to Judge Caprio's chambers, visibly emotional. "Your Honor," he said, "we've been waiting for someone to stand up to him for years. You gave us our department back." He wasn't exaggerating. For decades, Chief Mancuso had maintained a shadow reign, punishing officers who questioned him and rewarding those who looked the other way. That reign ended that day. Interim Chief Captain Williams implemented immediate reforms, body cameras for all officers, a civilian review board for complaints, and transparent investigative procedures. Federal monitors ensured the changes weren't just cosmetic, they were systemic. The police department, once suffocated by corruption, began rebuilding from the ground up. Letters and messages poured in from officers and citizens alike. Officer Maria Santos, tears in her eyes, wrote to Judge Caprio, "You showed us that the badge still means something. Because of you, we can serve with pride again." Families, previously fearful, now trusted that the system could protect the innocent and hold the powerful accountable. Chief Mancuso, once untouchable, was sentenced to federal prison for 8 years, pleading guilty to all charges. the man who believed he ran this town. Learn the hard truth: no badge, no connections, no threats can place someone above the law. Power without integrity is nothing. Judge Caprio reflected on that courtroom moment, the tension, the threats, the ultimate triumph of justice. 40 years on the bench had taught him many lessons, but this one was crystal clear. Integrity matters more than intimidation. Courage matters more than fear. And the law must apply to everyone equally. And to you watching this story unfold, remember this: when good people stand firm, when institutions function as they should, justice prevails. Nobody is above the law. If you believe in accountability, courage, and justice, make sure to subscribe and share this story. Justice may take time, but it always finds its way.